Hello, everyone. This is a little bit of a different kind of video. I've been promising this for a while, and a couple weeks ago, I told you we're going to be doing some different kinds of videos. If you are a first-time home buyer or if you're an investor, you have probably thought about buying a condo. And if you buy a condo or a townhome or a multitude of other properties, you end up in something called a homeowners association. I think there's kind of a lot of, I don't know, opaqueness surrounding this topic. I think there's not a lot of knowledge out there on what are the issues that are really going on today. And while I know a lot about HOAs, I wanted to sit down and bring you a conversation I had with a very good friend of mine who runs an association management company. They manage well over 200 HOAs. He is the smartest person I know when it comes to condos. And not only that, his company is the most progressive association management company out there. They are about pushing the envelope, changing the industry, increasing transparency and accountability. And those are values not always held by association management companies. Anyhow, if I lived in a community that had an association, this is the company that I would want to be my manager. Let's get to it. Here is my condo conversation with Scott Brady. My name is Stephen Meade, and we're kind of doing an interesting collaboration today. I have with me Scott Brady with Progressive Association Management. Progressive Association Management is an HOA manager. So they manage primarily condo associations. There are over 200 of these throughout Southern California that they manage. So they have a lot of expertise. And I've been promising to you guys to talk about condos for a while because I think condos really deserve their own video. And I think there's a lot to talk about with condos. So we're going to go ahead and get started.
Well, they're a total different animal than a single family detached, not an HOA, because when you buy in a condominium association, you become a member, a shareholder, and you're liable for the financials, and you're subject to the rules, and more importantly, you're subject to Davis Sterling and the state statute.
So pretend I'm an idiot. What is Davis Sterling? I know what it is, by the way, everybody, but I think people watching this might not know.
So it got very chaotic in the 70s. HOAs really took off after 1978, Prop 13. Right. And every city, for every new construction, didn't want the communities on their balance sheets, right? They didn't want them to be liable for the streets or the electrical or the landscaping. So you had an explosion of HOAs. Before that, there were a few of them, but not as many as there were after that. So these two gentlemen, Gray Davis, who eventually became governor, and Sterling, who is an expert in condominium law, they created the statutes that govern all the associations in California. Whether you're 4 owners or 4,000 owners, everybody is subject to the Davis Sterling statutes, and it tells a community when certain things have to be given to owners, what has to be disclosed, what has to be, what are they legally required to do during the course of a year.
So I'm going to set the stage of why some of this stuff is important for you, and this might even be something, Scott, you don't know yet. In Orange and LA counties right now, for 2-bedroom, 2-bath condos, there is over double the number of weeks of inventory as there are entry-level single-family homes. So meaning the condo market, now normally the condo market does have a little bit more inventory than single families. It's usually somewhere in that 10 to 20% more inventory in time, right? Like if no new homes came on the market, how long would it take for those to go under contract? But right now it is double. And that really signals kind of some distress in that condo market, and it's not coming out of nowhere, right? Like you've probably, if you're watching this, maybe you've had a friend or someone in your life, you have heard a condo HOA horror story, right? And I wanted to bring in Scott. I think this is great to talk about this, of what some of those things are, like, because I personally think condos are a great opportunity right now, but you also have to temper that with some caution and like know and understand the right things to look for. I have my list, but I'm kind of curious what you think are sort of the trouble spots. Why do you think that market is facing a little distress? Why are condos on sale right now? Because I really think they're on sale right now.
You could almost call this the Florida effect. So if you don't know, a few years back, a condominium tower effectively collapsed. And of course, whenever something happens, like in California, we had a balcony that failed, and it was an apartment complex, and the legislature immediately goes overboard and makes every building in the entire state be checked for balcony issues. Well, in Florida, after that disaster, many people died and $1 billion or more was paid out by insurance companies. They went overboard. And they said, okay, now all associations, all buildings have to be inspected. And that meant that when they didn't do well on these inspections, because no building does perfectly well, because everything ages and it falls apart basically.
Some of these are pretty old too. Like these buildings are
Florida in particular, they were doing high-rise buildings in the 50s and 60s because there's only so much land on the water, right? So, the Florida effect is now prices in Florida have gone down, way down, because they're getting special assessments in the not thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands. And so it really has turned off the appeal in Florida to buy a condominium. And now we're having that same impact in California for different reasons, not their laws. But of course, we'll talk about some of the laws that have come down, the balcony inspection. And really, in California, I would argue, and we're going to discuss it, is you have all these communities that were built in 1980, 1985. And builders don't build things to stay around for 100 years. They have an economic life typically, or all they care about is first 10 years, because that's when they have builder litigation lawsuits. But they're hoping they last 20 or 30 years, and by then they're out of here. They've moved on with their life. So I think we're just seeing a lot of issues, not just with the age of our buildings, balcony inspections, of course, and the biggest issue of all, which we'll certainly discuss, is I would say that boards over the last 20 years have been derelict in their duties and the fiduciary duties to the corporation, which meant they were supposed to be funding future repairs, and instead they wanted to be popular around the pool, so they kept the dues low. And because whenever you raise dues, people would get upset. They don't like things going up in cost. And so now we've had this sort of perfect storm, if you will, between the aging structures, insurance issues, and I think derelict boards over the last 20 or 30 years.
So it's funny you mentioned that, keeping the dues low. I actually saw a Facebook ad for a company that is touting, no, don't do dues increases. We will help you not do dues increases. And to me, especially as an agent, like if I hear that an HOA has not raised dues in 10 years, that is a red flag. And I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive. I mean, I know everybody likes low dues, but what you find is it's deferred maintenance, right? And a lot of these things, right? Let's pretend your car is making a funny noise and the mechanic says, maybe you should think about doing this, and you just don't do anything. And then one day it completely blows up. It's a much more expensive repair when that happens. I mean, when I look at the issues facing HOAs, like to me, there's like kind of a few big categories. One of those is just financial distress, right? Like they just haven't managed their reserves and their money. They've got these maintenance things, roofs, driveways, repainting, all these things, or slab leaks are a common one that we're seeing come up. And so they've got these sort of like financial burdens and they didn't really prepare for it and they don't really have a lot of reserves. That's one of them. The next one is just insurability. Like I have a client who lives in a complex in Laguna Niguel. It is near the ocean. It has beautiful views. It's also near a hillside of brush where there was a fire several years ago. And a lot of people don't know this. You know this, Scott, but you have to carry full replacement coverage. And if you don't, normal lenders will not go anywhere near lending on properties in that complex. So instantly you go from a world of putting a for sale sign in the market, getting showings, having people come through, to suddenly only cash buyers can buy that unit if you don't carry full coverage. So like it's not a situation you want to be in. Then my third category sort of distress, and I think this is one we're going to see coming in the next few years, and we saw this back during the Great Recession, is rising delinquencies among the owners, right? And that's where somebody just doesn't pay their dues, right? And so even though your budget might be balanced, if 20% of the owners aren't paying, it's not a balanced budget anymore.
Yeah, and the other thing, I think when a buyer buys in a condominium complex association, and let's say it's got a lot of common areas, their expectation is that my dues are going to pay for the future roof replacement, because that's a savings account. So when you pay your monthly assessments, let's call it $300, $100 of that's going for your current expenses, landscaping and water and whatever might go on, pool maintenance. But the other money is supposed to go in a special account called a reserve account, a savings account, so that in 15 years we have to replace a roof, I don't have to pay for it out of pocket. Well, that's the failure that's going on right now. I just had to replace my roof in my house. I'm not in an association, and it was $33,000. I had to write a check for $33,000. I didn't have a reserve account for the roof. But if I live in an HOA, I fully expect my board to make the right decisions so that in 20 years, whenever that roof needs to be replaced, I don't have a special assessment or emergency assessment. The money's just sitting there for that. And that's the failure of the boards right now. That's not happening routinely. They just don't have the money to effect the repairs they are mandated to do, because if it's in the governing docs, that then they run with the land. So if it's in the governing documents of the association that the corporation pays for the roof replacement, and that's in the governing documents, they have to pay for the roof replacement. There's not an option to take everybody pay individually. And so it is creating quite distress in the marketplace, in the HOA marketplace. I think the stat I've told you, read an article where 70% of buyers right now don't want to buy in an association. They don't want they hear the horror stories that Stephen's talking about, and they prefer not to buy. Then really, condos represent our most affordable product. You buy the condo, stay there 5 or 10 years, keep it as a rental, move up to a house, sell it, move up to a house, whatever. Or a lot of people, they sell the big house, move down to an association, move to a 55 and older community because they want all the stuff that didn't have when they owned a single family.
Or go near the water where they couldn't afford a single family home,
That's the advantage of that. So, yeah, it is quite a real issue that is now, I think for the last 25 years, nobody worried about associations. All you had to worry about, could I park my car overnight in the street? Well, now the legislature is getting concerned. And because the thing that owners don't realize, when they don't pay their dues, and they first get that pre-lien, they get the lien, then they go to something called collections, where if they're in arrears more than $1,800. Collections is a nice way of saying foreclosure. And you can lose your house because you don't pay your dues. Simple as that.
So there is actually some really good news, though, with this. And, I like to see the opportunity in things. And I think when you say 70% of buyers aren't interested in condos, to me, that's an opportunity, because I think a lot of these issues that HOAs are facing, I do think they are at least somewhat transitory in nature, right? Like the insurance apocalypse in California. Insurance might not get cheaper, but the availability of insurance will get better. I think there's a lot more attention being put on HOA finances. I also think HOAs, all of them, are being painted with a broad brush. And the reality is, some HOAs are well run. Some HOAs do have reserves. Every HOA is required to do a reserve study. It's every 3 years, I believe.
It's in person every 3 years. Every year there's a reserve study. 2 years it can be done from the desk, 1 year in person.
Okay, and it gives a percentage of where you should be in your savings versus where you are. So I think for a savvy buyer or a savvy investor, you can go into one of these complexes that's sort of painted with this broad stroke, right, of HOAs are bad, and you can go in there and get pretty big discounts. Even some of the HOAs, and you said a few words that are kind of very dirty words: special assessment, emergency assessment. Though right now, because of the way the market is, like there are complexes I've seen, they are considering a $10,000 per unit special assessment, but prices are depressed by $20,000 or $30,000 in there. And I think there's an opportunity for buyers, but the key is you have to be educated, you have to be informed, you have to go through the governing documents, which is CC&Rs, rules and regs,
bylaws,
articles of incorporation.
I think it's going to self-correct for this reason. I'm very involved at the California Association of Realtors, so is Stephen, and they just made me the co-chair of the Common Interest Development Working Group. And what we're going to recommend, and I think you're going to see the legislature adopt, you're going to have mandatory funding. Because the boards have been unable to do what they're supposed to do, what they're legally obligated to do, the legislature is going to take that away from them and say, tell you what, you're going to have to be funded to 50% of the fully funded, meaning that if you're supposed to have $1 million in the bank, you're going to require you have $500,000. Now they're going to do that over time because it's going to take a lot of these communities 5 or 10 years to get to that mandated number. But in due time, whether that's 5 or 10 years, every HOA in California will be at the right funding number. And then I think all these fears, because the boards can't do the right thing, the legislature is going to make them do the right thing, but it will take 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think there's a window of opportunity for buyers out there, for the ones that are willing to kind of really dive in and learn. And let's be honest, governing documents are not exactly riveting. Reading the budget, looking at the finances, the reserve study. By the way, just shameless plug, if you work with someone like me, I actually do go through those documents with you. I have always done that. I think it's very important to understand what you're buying into. Also, kind of a bit of a second, less shameless plug. Scott and I are partners on a project called HOA Snapshot that is going to take those governing documents and distill them into an easy to read report, and your HOA is going to receive a letter grade, right? We call it our HOA grade score. And that way it'll summarize some of these key facts. So that way people can buy into HOAs with a bit more confidence, even if you're not, not good at reading long documents with lots of jargon in them. But I think there's a lot of missed opportunity right now out there.
Just like the Florida market will bounce back, because they're doing these inspections and they're collecting these funds. I think what's happened in California is there's an overreaction right now. You're going to have legislative action take place. And then you want to be in an association, because the best thing about being an association, depending on, they're all different. Of course, some have no common areas and no amenities, but some have tennis courts and pools, and they've got rooms where you can meet, and they have fitness rooms and all that. And that's great when you move into a community like that, because you get the benefit of all these amenities at a fraction of the cost. And once they've got their funding back up again, and once insurance figures out that, okay, at the right price we'll insure anybody, I think they're going to be really appealing to buyers, particularly the first-time home buyer who wants that mortgage interest reduction, wants to write off the property tax, start building equity in a property, fix it up the way you want to, not worry about getting a 60-day notice to vacate. I think they're going to come back in. And by the way, 95% of all new construction are still in HOAs, meaning that everything that's new is basically in a homeowner association. So it's not like they're going to go away. Cities don't want these on their books. They are never going to want them on their books. So you're going to have to, and I think the number now is something like 5 million households in California live in an association. It's 35% of all households live in an association. That number is increasing every year. So in the end, they're not going away. They're still going to become more. So what we're going to have to do is adapt to them, get the legislator to do the right thing, and they are. They're very concerned of this huge increase in special and emergency assessments, because the reason is, let's say somebody bought a condo 10 years ago. They bought it for $200,000. It's now worth $600,000. They owe nothing on it, or very little. They have a low interest rate. They have a very low property tax, and now they get a $50,000 assessment.
Roofs, right?
They can't pay for it, so they say, you know what? I can't pay for it. I'm on a fixed income. And then they send that person to collections, again, foreclosure. So what's their right at that point? Well, they have to sell. That's great. They sell. Now they pay capital gains, possibly. They lose their property tax basis, probably. They lose that interest rate they had. And the legislators hearing about these stories of people being hurt because of the poor action or inaction of these boards over many years. And so now they're taking corrective measures. So in the end, I think it's going to self-correct. It's going to correct it, because it's just become a very problem that everybody's aware of, put it that way.
Yeah, and density being what it is, we don't have the land to build a bunch of single-family homes, especially in the more established urban centers that, frankly, young people want to live, right? Like there's not a lot of opportunities to build new swaths of single-family homes in downtown Long Beach, right? Like these are gonna be condo buildings if you're buying something, and I think the HOAs are here to stay, but I also think these can be a very valid first rung on that property ladder. I think some of these problems are going to work out, and I think people who have faith today are going to be on the receiving end of some of those benefits.
Well, let's say you're aware, because you get the HOA snapshot, or Stephen reads your documents for you and says, hey, there's going to be a special assessment of $30,000 next year. Well, if I'm a buyer, I'm going to that seller saying, take $30,000 off the sales price, or kick me back $30,000 so I can pay that assessment next year. It's a good negotiating tool right now to go through those documents and find some red flags, whatever those red flags might be, whether the deductible is really high on the insurance, or the replacement value isn't what it should be, or there's a special assessment coming, or they're underfunded in the reserves. You can leverage that as a buyer to get a better price, because all real estate sells at the right price. And if there's an association with some issues, you're going to leverage that information to get a better price from the seller.
And by the way, so just so people understand, special assessments and emergency assessments, they rarely come out of nowhere, right? Like there are signs, the minutes of the meetings, which you are required to get when you purchase, oftentimes they will discuss the possibility of a special assessment many meetings before actually doing it. And also, again, the reserve study, the finances, if a HOA is not in a great financial position, that risk of a future special assessment goes up. So they don't usually come out of nowhere for some unexpected reason. The writing's kind of on the wall for a while, and people just don't want to actually vote to do it. And then they reach a point where they don't really have any other options.
Yeah, I would say 1 out of 10 or 20 special assessments or emergency assessments are unforeseen. If the water main breaks in the middle of the community, that's unforeseen. Gas main breaks in the middle of the community, that's unforeseen. But pretty much you can tell if a roof needs to be replaced, and that's what the reserve study does. The reserve study specialist goes out, looks at the pool and says that's going to need to be replastered in 5 years. That roof's got to be replaced in 10 years. The stucco's got to be painted in 5 years. And so that's all that information is there. The problem right now, there's so much information. It's so confusing. And by law, most agents will not tell the buyer about the health of the association because then they have personal liability. If a buyer agent tells a buyer, hey, this is a great community, if I could, I'd buy in here, and the buyer closes escrow and turns out it's got financial issues and there's a new special assessment, they're going to sue the realtor saying, wait a minute, you told me that this place is great.
Also, and by the way, just to tell you, I know the official advice is to not provide guidance on people, but I've never felt comfortable with that. At least a lot of the HOA buyers that I've had, they are first-time home buyers. They're going into this. And so we sit down and we go through those documents together. And a lot of it is even just explaining what the documents are and what they say, right? And just kind of going through that and answering questions. Let me ask you this, Scott. What advice would you give someone today, either a first-time buyer or someone, an investor who's thinking of an HOA? Like what's kind of your sort of like few sentences of advice that you would give them?
So I've lived in an HOA and I sold that property in the HOA, and it wasn't because of the finances. I didn't like the rules and restrictions. So if you're not somebody who can live within the bounds of the law of the HOA, you want to paint your house pink or your condo pink, or you want to be able to do anything you want to, you're probably not a good candidate for an HOA. So, but if you like the fact that there's going to be rules and restrictions so people can't do things that are kind of annoying, you're a good candidate for an HOA. In the end, you need to buy real estate. Period. End of story. The replacement cost of if you buy a townhome for $400,000, I guarantee you the replacement cost on that is $600,000. If it would burn down to the ground, it would cost much more than what you're paying for. So to me, you want to buy, and if you can't afford a single family home, because that's just in Orange County, that price is now $1.2 million, and you've got to have at least $250,000 sitting around as a down payment, and you got to make a mortgage of almost $7,000 or $8,000. But there's great affordable condos out there right now at a great price because of everything we just mentioned that Steve's very aware of. So my opinion is read the documents carefully, particularly not just the financials, the rules and regulations. They're telling you what you can or can't do, how many pets you
what kind of pets you can have, right? Are there breeds you're not allowed to have?
You can use a garage for storage, or it has to be for cars only. You've got a big truck you want to put in the street, but there's no street parking overnight. These are things you should be really aware of. Even though it's a quasi-government and you can then run for the board and you can change those rules and regulations, that's a tough road to hoe. You're going to live with them for a while. So in the end, read those rules and regulations, understand what you're buying into, the economic health of the community. But if those things check off, absolutely buy in an HOA.
Yeah, it's funny. I think one of the hardest things too is people ask me, well, is this generally the rule? And the thing is, the rules vary from HOA to HOA. So one HOA might say no pet birds because somebody had 100 birds in their unit 20 years ago and they said, we're never going to let that happen again, right? These rules vary. Whether you can have a barbecue on your balcony, those rules vary, right? All kinds of things. So it's important to get an idea of those things when you're in there and understand that what might be a problem at one HOA is totally allowed at another.
No two HOAs are alike. None of them have the same financials. None of them have the same rules and regulations. Some are very lax. Like we manage communities where they're single family homes, and all we really take care of the streets and the lighting, and there really are no rules and regulations. It's like living without an HOA for the most part. And others incredibly, particularly if you have a stacked unit. So you have a unit on top of a unit. Well, this one's not allowed to have laminate flooring. They have to have carpet, and they're very very strict rules so that everybody can get along, right? Some have a lot of rentals, and the more rentals, generally you have a little bit less pride of ownership. Some have very few rentals. So yeah, I think it's all about, I think the difference between a single family home and a townhome and an HOA, single family home, you worry about the physical inspection, you worry about the location, a few things. With an HOA, you do that, and you got to look at the association itself. You got to do that second level of investigation, which you don't have to do in a single family, but that's not located in an association.
Scott, I just want to thank you for collaborating and working on this. I know people on my YouTube channel have been asking for the condo video that I've been promising for probably a couple months now. How can people, if someone is in an HOA or if someone out there is an investor, right, and they're not happy with the job that their management company is doing at their HOA, or they sit on a board, how do they get in touch with you at Progressive Association Management?
Yeah, please reach out. You can email me, of course, Scott Brady, 19.
I'll put his contact info.
Perfect, lovely. So we pride ourselves on not just promising, but delivering and documenting superior customer service for our associations, which is quite unusual in the industry. We're not a huge company managing thousands of associations. We currently manage about 230, and we try to limit the number of associations our managers manage so that they can provide that level of service. So we'd love to hear from you. We are always adding good associations throughout Southern California.
And I can attest to this, knowing some of the managers and watching the work that they've done, especially for HOAs that are having trouble and getting them back on the right track, which I think is where a lot of those really big companies fail. Like, they're great when everything's running smoothly, but when you actually need professional help, they're not there for you. So I can attest, Progressive Association Management is awesome. Whenever I have a client, I say, hey, put me in touch with the board member because I've got a great recommendation if somebody who might be able to help you. And I want to thank all of you for watching. We're also going to have the socials and stuff. I don't know. Did you want to go over your social media stuff? You're good. Okay. We'll have it down in the description. And I think there's going to be a video on Progressive's channel for this too. We're going to do videos. Obviously, if you are looking to become a first-time homeowner, or as an investor, if you think that condos in an HOA, if you see the opportunity, I'm really a believer in it right now. I think there's a window. Definitely reach out to me. I'd love to help you out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And we'll have another video for you real soon.